Hi, Read 585. Welcome back. This is part 2 of our week 14 lectures talking about the guiding principles for literacy coaches. I'm actually really excited about this lecture. I think it will be one of my favorites as I've tried to incorporate many different tools that I use in my job each day that have helped me become a more effective coach. So hopefully you can glean some new information, tips, strategies from this screencast. We have 2 session objectives. First, identify the principles of effective coaching, and that comes from our first article, What Matters for Elementary Literacy Coaching. And then second, we want to apply these principles to plan effective coaching opportunities as evidenced in assignment number 5 and your everyday life as a literacy coach. So let's get started with our first article, What Matters for Elementary Literacy Coaching, where we meet our literacy coach, Amanda. This is a sassy picture of Amanda there. So as we are introduced to Amanda, she starts her day early at school, arriving, she's checking her email, she's got a message from her principal, she's got to reply to a teacher because they're so needy and they email you constantly. She checks out her calendar for the day. If you're like me, you schedule everything you do in Outlook. You print out your weekly Outlook calendar. You have it on a clipboard that follows you everywhere. You handwrite in any observations you make. You highlight them color-coded. Yellow is important or unique things that are happening for the week. Pink are your one-on-one debrief feedback meetings you have with your teachers after you observe with them. Orange are your observations. Yeah, there's a lot of strategic thinking behind that. So in any case, she reviews her daily calendar. She's modeling a guided reading lesson in a first grade classroom. She has a pre-observation conference with a second grade teacher. She's meeting with a kindergarten teacher to discuss assessment scores, data analysis. She's got an upcoming book study group happening. And then, of course, there are the unexpected situations, requests, and emergencies. Your office door is like a revolving door. People just go in and out. They have lots of needs. There's emergencies. There's a new student. You need to assess them. There's a grade level team who needs your help. They came and got you. So, what exactly do you spend all of your time doing? Are you doing more coaching? Are you doing more work with students? Are you working as a reading specialist or as a specialist of something else? So there are a lot of questions as we opened this semester thinking about and what does a successful literacy coach look like, and what knowledge do you need to be successful in this position? How much time should you be working directly with teachers compared to coaching activities? How do you build collaborative relationships with teachers? Which activities, coaching activities, help teachers enhance their instruction? So basically, these are all of the questions that I know were going through your head at the start of this semester, and as we proceeded to learn about the role of the literacy specialist. From there, we looked at data analysis and how to use that to drive your professional development and establish school improvement goals. And now here we are with the coaching, the final piece in the puzzle. So how exactly do you go about doing that? How do you answer all of these questions as far as the literacy specialist role? Well, this article is here to help you with their 7 research-based principles for literacy-based coaching. So I'm going to go through each one of these and then kind of add my own thoughts to each one. So the first before we start, why literacy coaching? Well, it provides that job-embedded ongoing professional development that we've been reading about that is so important. Second, it's rooted in cognitive coaching, peer coaching, and mentoring, which has its own research base of being effective approaches. And then third, it is the necessary scaffold to develop mastery teaching, and that is quoted by me. So now I'm going to talk about those 7 principles for literacy coaching. So first, coaching requires specialized knowledge. So your job is to help classroom teachers improve their instruction. How are you going to do this? Well, through a variety of different things: large group presentations, small group teacher study groups, grade level team meetings, supporting individual teachers, one-on-one. So you need to have knowledge surrounding the literacy processes, assessment, instruction, a large knowledge base around literacy education, coaching, but then you're working with teachers. So in order to do that effectively, you need to have an understanding of adult learning principles. So how do you develop this expansive knowledge base? Well, first, you need to have successful classroom teaching experience in a variety of grade levels. Second, you need to be an active participant in your ongoing professional development. So currently, as a student in the master's of education in the reading department, you are getting phenomenal professional development, but what's going to happen when you graduate? How are you going to continue on with that? What professional journals are you going to subscribe to? What books are you going to read? What conferences are you going to attend? So you need to have ongoing professional development. You could even establish a network of other literacy specialists that you meet with and that you maybe do video observations of and give feedback or practice scripted conversations, all of which are great professional development for coaches. And then third, you can even get your graduate degree, and which can lead to advanced certification and give you more in-depth knowledge. So check that one off. You've already done that. All right, moving on to the second principle of effective coaching. Hold on, I want to make sure I touched on everything I wanted to say. I did want to emphasize again that your knowledge should come across multiple grade levels, and then at the student, classroom, and school level, and then also to continue to update your knowledge base by reading journals, books, attending conferences. All right, in fact, currently I am developing my summer reading list. Last summer I read, I think, 17 books, a book a week, and I sent my teachers emails on what I learned each week. I don't know how enthusiastic they were to get those, but I don't know. They definitely rated me higher on being someone. I do a feedback survey, and they provide feedback on if I am concerned about my professional growth and or actively working towards my professional growth, and I got rated a lot higher because of that, so that's a good thing. All right, moving on. Principle number 2, time working with teachers is the focus of coaching. So you should be spending your time with teachers engaged in activities like observing, modeling, conferencing, co-teaching, and leading book study groups. It was found that on average, coaches spent only 20% of their time working with teachers. Yikes, we need to increase that percentage and do more of these activities that directly impact teachers. Because it was found, they had a lot of research to support this, that the highest average student reading gains occurred in the classroom supported by a literacy coach who engaged in the most interactions with teachers. So schools in which coaches spent more time working directly with teachers had a greater percentage of students scoring at the proficient level in first and second grade. So these studies indicate the benefit of when the literacy coach's time is spent working directly with teachers to help them improve their practice. So go out and observe, meet, mingle, be a resource, debrief, give feedback, all of that good stuff. All right, principle number 3 is collaborative relationships are essential for coaching. So in here they talk about how coaches must build on a foundation of establishing trust, maintaining confidentiality, and communicating effectively with teachers. If there is one thing I impress upon, is that you need to be intentional about how you are going about establishing your relationship. So what do I mean by this? Each year prior to the start of a new school year, I make my own professional development plan. If you can't tell, I love plans. And This professional development plan really guides my interactions with teachers. I set goals and determine next steps for how to be a better coach. So I love this quote: there are leaders and those who lead. Those who lead inspire us. And the goal of this plan, therefore, is to be someone who inspires. So I actually begin my professional development plan by analyzing data. Yes, that's right. I collect data on a variety of things. So I did the Strength Finder 2.0 to learn about my top 5 strengths. So thinking about how I can use these strengths to my advantage as a coach. We also do I think I mentioned on the flip side, the Flippin profile. What is it? It's called constraint theory. And we're getting real personal here. I'm going to cover that up. So, constraint theory is basically that you have your strengths, but they are such great strengths that they can also be a constraint. So, for instance, I am pretty confident about things, and that can be a strength because I don't waver or waffle. I make a decision and I can move forward, but it can also be a constraint because I might bulldoze other people. I might not ask others for their input. I may just, kind of steamroll. So that was information that I found out from doing my Flippin profile. I also have really high expectations, but that can sometimes lead to being overly critical of others. Like I said, we do these Excel scorecards where teachers rate me on a variety of different statements. So I'm looking at that, staff data, blah, blah, blah. All right, so here were the goals I had developed last school year. And not as many as a coach here. This was our second year, and I was trying to get PLCs up and running and do a lot of other things. But the one thing I did want to do more is to celebrate successes more. Like I mentioned, I can be a highly critical person, mainly because I expect so much of others and myself. So I wanted to celebrate more and then have my teachers feel like they were affirmed more. So that's probably the most relevant goal to the coaching. So, here were different celebrations I had planned just for fun. Here are ways we're going to celebrate success. Here's how I'm going to openly acknowledge the contributions of others and provide affirmation. So this was my professional development plan for last year. I think the one for this year is even better, and the data I have collected midway through is showing that it's been a better plan. But the K2 wing team will strongly agree that their dean solicits and respects their critical feedback as measured by formal and informal feedback. So like I said, a lot of times I don't get input from others, so I really worked this year on soliciting their feedback and getting their input. And then again, affirmations was low for me, so providing more affirmations and encouragement to others. So if we go to goals 2 and 3, you can see here are the ways that I'm planning to solicit feedback. Here's how I'm monitoring that. Here's how I'm measuring it. I want to receive feedback, listen to the ideas of others, decrease the amount of critical feedback, build collaborative relationships. So taking a step back in group interactions, focus on asking more reserved people what their thoughts are, being willing to say, no, you go ahead, I insist, avoid interrupting others, finishing their sentences, holding back opinions, start asking questions instead of giving an answer, make an agreement versus giving a directive. So I worked really hard on these things, and it's taken a concerted effort because this is not my natural tendency. But in order to be a better coach, I received the feedback through our informal feedback survey, that these were the things that I could work on and grow in. So definitely doesn't just happen organically. trust building and being an effective communicator with teachers, you need to really get input on what they want and need from you and how you can fulfill that. And if you're a planner like me, it may help you to do something like this. So, I put being more positive on here, increasing the amount of affirmations and encouragement, dropping by their rooms to greet them in the morning, good stuff like that on there. So that is principle number 3, developing those collaborative relationships, building trust. And another way to do that would be to continually message that you're there to collaborate, not to evaluate, and to really structure your interaction with them as more of a problem solving approach versus a mandating, sort of directing approach. They mention in the article using a facilitative communication style by having a willingness to answer their questions and offer suggestions without giving absolute solutions. And they also talked about how expert coaches were able to use paraphrasing of the teacher's concerns and comments, use a lot of open-ended questions, and provide more respect for teachers' opinions. So they really used their language. They were very intentional about, what they said and what they did. I know last year, maybe my first year, I had the action step to use we instead of you or I. Even in follow-up emails, I would use we instead of you or I to really emphasize that collaboration. So a coach's language is very indicative of the relationship between the coach and teacher. So they suggest that to do professional development as a coach, to analyze the language you use or analyze the language used by other coaches and do some sort of role playing to help you get some insight there. So they give us an example as well of Selena Rodriguez in action about how she starts the school year introducing herself, explaining what her role is, offering to help in setting up classroom libraries. She also communicates through her actions and words that she is not part of the evaluation process. She emphasizes the message, I'm here to be a sounding board and a resource. She's also highly visible at grade level meetings and at workshops, really positioning herself as a co-learner with the teachers in the school. Again, she uses that open-ended format when she meets with teachers. How are you feeling about this? Or tell me about that. Let's talk about what you're doing and discuss some ideas. Which of these ideas would be most helpful to you? She gives them some choices there. Next principle is number 4, coaching that supports student reading achievement focuses on a set of core activities. So there are many different things which you could spend your time doing. Grade level meetings, helping to plan lessons, co-teaching, book clubs, delivering monthly professional development. So what is the best way to spend your time? They suggest that literacy coaches should administer and discuss student assessments with teachers. I just did that a few weeks ago. I gave leveled reading assessments to every second grader in our building because my teacher said they didn't have any time, so I took the time and then I debriefed with them on the performance of each of their students. I helped them group them, I gave them next steps, and I said I will be back in 6 weeks to assess them again and I better see some growth. I did a little more collaboratively than that, of course, though. Other things you can do is observe teachers' instruction and offer supportive feedback. So that's going to be what we're going to talk about in a minute, different observation protocols you could use to do that. You can conference with teachers about their instruction and their students, model instruction in classrooms, and then monitor student achievement in reading and compare it across classrooms. So those are obviously very teacher-focused activities that you can spend your time doing. That is highly recommended. Principle number 5, coaching must be both intentional and opportunistic. So I've already talked to you about the intentionality piece, having a plan for how you are going to interact and collaborate with those that you are working with. Another piece, though, is to script out your conversations you're having, and I'll go through my process in a little bit about when we talk about the next article about how I approach giving feedback to a teacher and how I structure that reflective coaching conversation. They also talk about here being intentional with how you differentiate for your experienced teacher versus your novice teacher, and that how you have a roadmap to guide your work with the teachers. They also talk about then the opportunistic. Actually, let's stay with coaching must be intentional first. I have a few things to show you to be intentional. So here's a plan I created to help support some first grade teachers. By about the second week of school, it was blatantly obvious that these 3 teachers, all at the same grade level, who were brand new to teaching, were struggling and needed some support. So I created a plan to help them with that. So as you can see that within my plan, classroom procedures were rough for them. So I broke down which procedures they needed to teach and review each day. Next, borrowing from the work of Doug Lemov's Effective Teaching Habits, I had identified that 100% is the strategy they needed to work on, which is that 100% of students are on task 100% of the time. And he even gives you 6 strategies for addressing noncompliance. So, for instance, the whole group redirection, the anonymous redirection, I'm waiting for 2 people, the lightning quick using your name, and then a few other different strategies as well. So I was teaching them about that on Tuesday. On Thursday, when I saw them again, we were watching videos of 100% to analyze, and then we did some implementing and some role playing. So take a look at that. That's kind of like the I do, we do, you do, a little bit of gradual release here. On the first day, I'm teaching them about it. The second day, we're kind of interacting. And then here they are implementing and role playing. It gets even more specific because on this day, they observed veteran teachers using a specific protocol and they came up with next steps for implementation. I also observed each of them for 10 to 12 minutes, giving them feedback. On this day, I provided them a 25-minute PD during their prep. This day I was in all of their rooms to teach and practice line procedures with students. I observed for 10 to 12 minutes, immediate feedback. I provided PD during their prep time. Here I am modeling a phonics lesson with 100% compliance. Here is one of the other deans modeling for them again. Here I am observing and then providing PD. So pretty much each day there was some modeling that they were observing, as well as getting a little mini PD during their prep. Next week, here are the procedures we're learning. We're working on what to do, that strategy, what is it, looking at videos, doing some role plays. Real-time coaching is something that I love to do, but it is not for the novice coach as it requires some foundation and groundwork to be laid. But I believe strongly that when you are a coach and you are modeling a lesson, that is essentially the I do of your gradual release. And then when you go back and you observe them, that is the you do of your gradual release. They are having to do it independently. So when they watch you and then they have to go and implement, that is not an effective gradual release because you are missing that we do component. So just like when you teach your students using the gradual increase of responsibility or the gradual release of responsibility, you have the I do, we do, you do. You need to have that same approach in coaching. So what are you going to teach them? How are you going to work on that together? How are they going to interact with it a little bit in a supportive and structured environment? And then how are they going to be on on their own. You can't expect them to just watch you and then be able to implement it. There needs to be a bridge between that. And the way that I bridge it is by doing real-time coaching. I'm going to dig up an article I have on this, but I kind of just developed my own protocol for it. But there is an article, and I'll give it to you next week if I can find it. But real-time coaching is awesome. And it is in the moment coaching, hence the name real time coaching. Basically, the teacher wears their Bluetooth in their ear, and I call them on their cell phone, and I sit in the back of the room and I tell them what to say or do in the moment, which I'm sure is like a frenzy for them to be doing, which is why you have to really coordinate with them a system and how it's going to look. But essentially they are teaching, but you're in their head directing them what to look at, what to look for, what to do next. I think it's best applied for management. I think that you can coach teachers with their content and delivery and their instruction a little bit better if you do like the pre-observation meeting and then observe them and then do the reflection after. But I think this is great for in the moment if they're having difficulty managing a classroom. Co-teaching is also a good approach where you can teach a lesson with them and kind of tag team the lesson. But sometimes I have a tendency to dominate the co-teaching of the lesson. Shocking, I know. So students will respond to me, but not to them behaviorally. So this is kind of a segue to that. All right, we talked a lot about this already, so I'm going to close that out. The other thing I wanted to share with you is a differentiation plan that I created at a school I worked at. So as this article mentioned, that you should have a different route for experienced teachers. So here, Focus 1, these are my more experienced teachers. So with them, I'm doing a monthly data meeting to go over their DRA RAS guided reading data. I'm also doing a weekly planning meeting for their guided reading. I'm observing them every other week in the area of need, doing some targeted support, helping with challenging students. Focus 2 is kind of my next tier of teachers. I'm doing the monthly data meetings, I'm doing the weekly planning, I'm observing once a week during workstation, so instead of every other week, I'm increasing the frequency and the intensity, and then I'm doing a 15 to 20 minute debrief with them, whereas that was not part of that. Focus 3 are my newer teachers, the novice teachers, so same pieces as before, but then I even broke them into different groups. So these teachers need guided reading observations once a week for 20 minutes. These teachers need station observations for 10 to 15 minutes a week, and then these need a weekly meeting to follow through with the execution. So they might be in 2 of these groups or all 3 of these groups. So this is a way you can differentiate your plan of support. So let's go back to our PowerPoint here. So that is the intentional piece, having plans for support, differentiating your plans, having a roadmap. But at the same time, you also want to be available for opportunistic coaching, where you are available and accessible. You stop by to chat with teachers in the hallways, in their classroom, visit teachers in the lounge to say hello. I love Patrick Lencioni. He's most well known for 5 dysfunctions of a team, which I love. It's a theory regarding how to be an effective team. But his more recent book, The Advantage, talks about the beauty in just dropping in and having these informal conversations and what you can learn about people and how you can relationship build in those opportunities. So that would be that piece. And I believe and it talks about in the article how those encounters, those opportunistic encounters, often open the door to intentional coaching because through those encounters, you're relationship building with them. All right, let's go on to Principle 6. Coaches must be literacy leaders in the school. What does that mean? You need to be 1, setting goals for the direction of the school, 2, developing people, hopefully toward those goals, And 3, redesigning the organization to facilitate the accomplishment of the goals. So with the goals, you're setting the direction for the school in the area of literacy. Then by developing people, you're going to support the teacher's professional growth by working collaboratively with them so that the school can achieve its literacy goals. And then you're going to redesign the organization in a variety of ways, working with the principal to create a literacy block maybe, reevaluating the framework or the schedule. A lot of you are rethinking how intervention is delivered at your school. Is it being delivered at all? Is it being delivered in a systematic way? So that's how you can be a literacy leader in your school. And the last principle is that coaching evolves over time. So, you can't expect whether you're, a first year coach or a 10-year coach that, um, you're going to be a proficient coach right away. It definitely evolves over time as you gain in confidence, as you develop different strategies, as you learn through your professional reading about different approaches, as you learn from seeing other coaches, as you learn from working with different teachers. So definitely evolves. I'm a much better coach now than I ever was before, and I hope that I will continue to evolve. But as you can see, I'm very strategic in doing my own professional development and having plans and reflecting on my plans and looking at the data to see if my plan is effective in being a better coach. So I believe that's all I wanted to talk about for this article. There were some interesting questions posed by this article, like which guiding principle might you want to focus on in your school? What steps could you take to begin putting this guiding principle into action? So similar to how I made the professional development plan, you may also want to do that. Select a principle that you feel like is a need, and then determine the action steps to get there. And then second, which of the guiding principles do you think would be most difficult to accomplish in your school, and how might you be able to overcome the obstacles to implementing this guiding principle? So great questions to think about with this article. All right, let's move on to the reading specialist as an instructional coach, our article on reflective coaching. So in this article, they highlight 4 elements to consider when coaching teachers. First, systematically collecting data during observations. Second, reviewing data as part of the instructional coaching conversation. Third, the importance of quality questioning. And fourth, connecting PD to current instruction. This is a great framework to use for those of you who had questions about how to even initiate a coaching opportunity. Another thing they emphasized was that as a coach, you need to have your own support team, and we're going to read a great article directed to that next week, and that you need training too. So it's interesting because this article is actually a study. They were looking at how just because there's a literacy in a coach in the school doesn't necessarily mean that those individuals are doing any coaching, and what does it look like to be an effective coach. So they took 24 schools involved in the Minnesota Reading First professional development program, schools from a variety of programs, and then all teachers, kindergarten through grade 3, were going to receive ongoing job-embedded professional development, hello, coaching, through weekly teacher-led collaborative study groups to learn new instructional techniques, examining student data, adjusting instruction, a variety of different things, watching video clips. And then you have the coaches. So the coaches were a diverse group of teachers. They ranged in experience from 5 to 30 or more years, varying levels of degrees. So the coaches were then trained. So They were given opportunities to view video clips of each other's teaching and then initiate coaching conversations with one another. And then a third coach was encouraged to observe the coaching conversation so that he or she could give feedback to the coach. So I've actually participated in this exercise a number of times, and I always find it really valuable. So you have someone who is the teacher role, someone who is the coach role, and then you set up this scenario where, the coach is walking the teacher through a reflective questioning, and then you have a third person who's kind of that bird's eye view looking in, and they are the ones who actually give feedback to the coach in the coach's role. So they gave some training to their coaches, and then they took a look at the impact of the coach in these different settings. And it was hard for them to see if, the increase in student reading scores had anything to do with the coaching conversations. But what they could say was that as a result of the coaching conversations, many teachers obviously, observably, made changes to their instruction as demonstrated by the teacher observation data. And so they're hoping that the changes the teachers made to their practice is what resulted in an increase in student achievement. So let's talk about step one. That is the systematic collection of data. So what counts as data? Typically we think of reading levels, reading scores, your BPST, your QRI, whatever it is. But here we're really talking about how observation information would count as data, and that would be the basis for your conversation with your teacher. So my process for collecting observation data is nothing fancy. I have my clipboard, I have several sheets of plain white copy paper, I have several pens because I often run out of ink, several pens on me, and I also have my stopwatch or my timer. And basically I go in, so I always typically have an idea of when I'm going to go in because I want to look for something specific, so I may plan to go in for a phonics lesson, I may plan to go in for a reading workshop, I may want to see a guided reading lesson. So I'll always look at their schedule, and I'll look at their unit plans that they have to post on our Universal Drive, and I'll see, what it is I should be seeing at this time, what is the objective they're hitting. I want to make sure I'm not going in during an assessment because that's a waste of my time sometimes, unless we're working on procedures, routines, transitions, then it wouldn't be. So pretty much I just go in with my white paper and my stopwatch, and I write down the objective, which should be written on the board, and I just write down everything I see and hear in direct quotes. And if you recall from Read 516, we read an article on taking anecdotal records and how they need to be as objective as possible. So I literally just write down the observable behaviors. So, what is the student specifically doing? Has 3 sentences. Sometimes I'll even write the student's 3 sentences so that we can analyze it. The more evidence you can collect, the better. So I'll write down, what the teacher's saying, what the student's saying. Sometimes I even draw a line down the middle of my paper. So on one side I have what the teacher says, and on the other side I have what the student says. So I wanted to share some observation tools with you. This one is the selective scripting tool, and it comes from the New Teacher Center out of Santa Cruz. So why do I have my stopwatch? Because over here I'm putting the time in increments. So, at 1 minute, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 30, whatever. What's the teacher doing? What's the student doing? So this is the selective scripting tool where you literally just write, you script out what does the teacher do, what does the student do at different intervals at time. I've often found that to be a great tool, and typically this is what my observation looks like, except just on a blank white sheet of paper. I have times going down and then what's happening at those different times, trying to be as specific as possible, capturing what the teacher is saying, what the students are saying, what they're doing, what the work is that they're producing today. I copied down the specific test questions they were asking because I want to have a conversation about the level of rigor on that assessment. I also want to remember to talk to them about how there was a spelling error on that assessment. All right, here's the seating chart tool. It essentially is a white piece of paper, and on this you can make the teacher's seating chart and who is sitting where. I've used this to tally which kids get called on and how frequently, to make them aware of the fact that while you're calling on this kid who sits right here 10 times in 20 minutes, these people over here, no one's getting called on, there's no think pair shares, nothing's going on over here. You can also use it to chart movement patterns. So if you make your diagram of their seating arrangement, you can just draw lines of how the teacher moves. Very good visual to show like, hey, you hang out right here on the board the whole time. You never broke the plane. You need to leave and mingle and walk around and monitor student behavior and come down back here and let them know you're watching them. All right, here's a tool I thought would be good because it is called Best Practices that support students with language needs. A lot of you have high populations of English language learners and are thinking about how to coach teachers to support them. So here's a tool where we have best practices for English language learners, and here's where you would collect your evidence of how they are using those best practices. You can easily modify this too. I know a lot of you came up with things like you have culturally relevant pedagogy that you've mentioned, but you also have things like Cornell notes or different things. So whatever it is you're hoping that they implement, you can put that over here and then write down what evidence you collect. And then last is content strategies and alignment. This is an easy one to use. Content, so what are they learning? Strategies, how are they learning it? And is it aligned? Or is the what and the how, are they aligned? So those are some different tools you could use. Again, the plain white paper is probably my favorite. So now that you've collected this observational data, your selective scripting of what's happening in the classroom, there are many options for how you can discuss this data. First, you can provide them with the observation notes ahead of time. So if this is a teacher I've worked with for a long time, I'm completely comfortable photocopying my scripted notes and putting them in their mailbox, probably stapled so that it's more confidential or whatnot. In doing that, you can give them guiding questions to think about as they read through the notes. So don't forget, we're meeting Wednesday during your prep to debrief this observation. Please read through the notes and think about this one question, these two questions, these three questions. Maybe you want them to highlight evidence of how they implemented something, or be prepared to talk about how they're using student data to inform their practice. If it is someone that I haven't been working with as long, I think it's really intimidating to just put multiple pages or one page of writing in their box. So a lot of times I will make a copy of the notes and give them to them at the debrief meeting, and we will read through the notes together and process through them. You can go through all of the notes, or you can highlight. This is where it's important to have a plan and to be prepared. Highlight certain parts of the notes that you specifically want to discuss. You could also video the lesson. I think that would be a lot easier than selectively scripting it out. You can capture more when you're videoing it out. And you can even email the video to them ahead of time and give them guiding questions. I've done that a lot before. Or you can watch the video with them together and have designated stopping points at which you discuss. Or you could not use the notes and just script questions about what's kind of happening in their, sometimes I even have coaching conversations on their unit plans. So we may just go through their unit plans, and I have specific questions I've scripted to ask. So maybe you don't have any observation notes at all. So the importance of quality questioning, like with lesson planning, the more prepared you are, the better the conversation, the more they will learn. So I know when I was a classroom teacher that when I had really thought through my lesson plan and I had scripted it out and I had a higher level of detail, that plan was usually implemented a lot better. Same thing with coaching. When I'm scripting out my questions, when I know exactly where I want to go with the conversation, it's going to get there a lot better. So I recommend that you script out your essential questions. It's helpful to think of the big question that you want to get to, and then you have to work backwards to lead up to that. So a lot of my favorite questions are as follows. I most often start out with, so what was the goal for this lesson? Or tell me about is a great way to start these. So you want to have open-ended questions, no yes or no questions, and you don't want to have very pointed questions. They should be pretty loosely structured. So you can even say, tell me about the goal for this lesson, or what were you hoping to accomplish with this lesson? And then, do you have evidence that students met it, or what is the evidence that students met your goal for them? Now, here's where you could diverge into many different paths. So, what evidence do you have that students met it? Maybe they don't have any evidence. So you're talking about, so how are you going to measure at the end of your lesson if they learned anything? What could that look like? Do you have any thoughts or ideas? Or let's say they have evidence that the students met the goal and you know otherwise. Students did not learn anything from this lesson. So you can talk about that piece as well. So that can go many different ways. Also, more open-ended, what did you notice? Just what did you notice? Or what did you notice about XYZ? Is there a way you could have done that differently? So I have a teacher working on active engagement strategies, and so she's incorporating Think, Pair, Shares, which is a great engagement strategy. However, I scripted an observation where the two kids, one isn't making eye contact with the other, they're looking away, and only one kid is talking. So it's not even a think, pair, share. So now we're talking about, what did you notice from this script here? It's very obvious in my notes that student A is the only one talking in the partnership. Student B has arms folded, is looking down, is not making eye contact. So now, is there a way that you could approach this or do something differently? Could you give them more think time? Could you do a right pair share so they have their answer formulated? Could you teach them about how to interact with their peer? Because even though they're fifth graders, they aren't too sure how to do this still. So here are some guiding questions that came from the article. What were the children able to do in this reading lesson? What went well? So kind of getting them to focus on the positive. So what were the positive outcomes? What went well? What did you as the teacher do to help the students succeed? So, I had a teacher the other day talk about, oh, so and so, this student is having an awesome week, but this student is having a terrible week as far as behavior goes. And so I just said, well, do you think there's anything you're doing for the first student that you could do for the second student to help them behaviorally? And she said, oh, yeah, I actually implemented this new, motivation technique for the first student, and I think that's why he's having such a great week. And so I'm like, oh, well, could you use that with the second student? Yeah, I can definitely do that. So, drawing their attention to what they're doing well that's working and getting them to apply it on a broader spectrum. I have a teacher who always says, I was so afraid the kids would be crazy after break or that their behavior would be terrible, and they're not, they're doing great. And I try to always ask them, well, what do you think that you're doing to help them be successful? Because I don't think they just innately came back from a 2-week vacation and are good. Okay, and then the last question, what else could have been done to make the lesson even stronger or to help students be even more successful? So 4, I'm kind of ad-libbing on this one, but I want you to know the importance of having a meaningful close to the conversation that is then connected to their professional development. So I try to have them make a commitment, and this goes back to Patrick Lencioni's framework. In order to hold someone accountable to something, you need to first have them commit to it. So, what are you going to do differently or try out this week? And that's where they tell you, and then you say, great, I look forward to seeing that. Or, let me know how it goes. Or another approach could be, what next steps did you come up with as a result of our conversation? Oh, you can't think of anything? Well, let me give you some options or ideas or suggestions. And then I will usually do a follow-up email to them, thanking them for their time, and then reminding them of the next steps that remember that collective, collaborative we agreed to. And I've actually received very positive feedback about those follow-up emails that they appreciate that I'm, following up and reminding them about the outcomes of our conversation. So those have been a positive tool. All right, hopefully you've identified the principles of effective coaching from our first article and now are feeling a little bit better prepared to apply them to assignment number 5 and just in general at your school setting. To launch you, I found this quote on Pinterest and I think it's very applicable on multiple levels. Sometimes those who challenge you most teach you best. And I think as a coach, you are someone who challenges others, and people don't often like to be challenged. So you need to remind them that that's why you're there. If you just accepted the status quo and said everything was great about that lesson, they wouldn't grow. So you want to push that growth mindset and remind them, hey, I'm here to be a think partner with you. I'm here to make you the best, fifth grade teacher, middle school teacher, whatever they are. And I'm really just invested in helping you be effective I'm going to challenge you, and I know that's hard to receive critical feedback sometimes, but if I didn't give you that feedback, you're not going to learn or grow. And then on the flip side, sometimes those who challenge you most teach you best. So those teachers that are a little bit resistant, that have a lot of questions, I've learned a lot from my interactions with those teachers about how to be a better coach. So I'm very appreciative to learn with them and to grow with them because when they challenge you, they also teach you as well. So that concludes our first week on coaching. Join me back next week where we are going to continue the conversation of coaching. Have a great week.